Okay, so perfect. So welcome to Startup Sunday webinar series, all things legal from inception to exit. I can see that we've got a number of participants joining us now. Welcome to those who are joining. We will start in a few moments because we've had an overwhelming response, which is fantastic. Lots of participants today. So we'll just give them a few moments more to join us, and then we will start our series. Excellent. Okay, so I can see there are some participants still joining. What we might do though, just because I'm conscious of time and I know everybody's taken their time out today to join us, let us get started and participants can join us as we walk through the presentation today. So welcome once again to the participants who have joined us. Today is the third series in a Startup Sunday webinar series hosted by Legal Circle. Today we have joined with us a speaker from ADGM, Virtuzone, Dubai Startup Hub, and Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park. Salma, can I get you to move to the next slide, please? Perfect. So today's session is on incorporation. So a lot of times we've been approached by entrepreneurs, whether that's in the UAE or globally, with questions around where do we set up? Why do we need to set up with a particular form, and how to make that choice about where to set up, because as you're probably already aware, UAE is a rich landscape with multiple jurisdictions within the one place, and often it can be a confusing choice for entrepreneurs who are making a decision where to set up, how and why. So today we have joined with us a number of speakers from different parts of the UAE, different jurisdictions, different free zones, and the mainland, who will shed some light onto what the organizations that they work for, what they offer, and hopefully shed some insight into how to make that decision easier for you. So today we have Martin Tidestrom, the Associate Director of Events at the Abu Dhabi Global Markets. We have Natalia Shefiu, Senior Manager and Special Projects and Entrepreneurship at Dubai Startup Hub. Shefiu Ismael from the Ecosystem Development at the Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park, and Paul Bryson, Director of Domestic Structuring at Virtuzone. So thank you all for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm sure that it's going to be an insightful conversation for our audience. One thing before we do get started is that I'd like today to be an interactive discussion. So to that end, what we will be doing is, after we've heard from our speakers, we can open the floor to some questions. So what I'd like the audience and participants to do is, if you do have any questions, go down to the chat box and ask questions in the chat box. I will pick up on those throughout the conversation. And for those that I've not answered through the conversation, then we can and will attend to those before the end, after the speakers have spoken. So today I'd like to begin the conversation with Martin Tidestrom. So Martin, you're the Associate Director of Abu Dhabi Global Markets. Thank you for joining us today. What I'd like to hear more about from you is Abu Dhabi Global Markets. How are they different to other free zones in the UAE? What does it offer? Why is it preferential and advantageous for some clients and entrepreneurs to be considering to set up in the Abu Dhabi Global Markets? And anything that you think is added value to our audience today. So without further ado, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Suraya. And let me just say, I think we had the title of one of my colleagues there. If you expect me to say something interesting about events, I'm sorry, I can't. I work in business development. I can add more, I hope, to the question of entrepreneurship support and how to structure business. Happy to try to discuss events, of course, as well. Can we take the next slide, please? ADGM, while that one pops up, is the International Financial Center of Abu Dhabi. Our high-level role here is to help grow the economy, primarily boosting financial services, but also enable growth and diversification across a whole range of other sectors. We are, along with the IFC, a federal free zone. We're the only 2 federal level free zones in the country. What that means is that we can disapply the local laws, and in our case, we directly apply English common law. So what you get legally in ADGM is exactly what you get in the UK and other common law jurisdictions. And this is very important, primarily to financial institutions who have a lot of value at risk under the regulatory system, and they want the known, they want predictability. But as we'll see, it's also important for tech investors and more so to tech founders as well. We have a 3-pillared structure. We have an international regulator, we have our own courts, and they have strong agreements with the local judiciary on jurisdictions. If something goes wrong, you have an ADGM governed contract. It's ruled or solved by our courts. You can trust that that is carried out also outside this free zone. We support a range of financial activities and a range of non-financial as well. And there are a couple of themes, I think, in common that make ADGM a relevant option for companies, whether local or international, when they try to find an ideal base in our part of the world. One, and the most important one, is the commercial rationale, the business proximity, the access to various markets they serve. And there I think Abu Dhabi presents an interesting mix of sectors. It's obviously the economic powerhouse of the country with roughly 2/3 of the economy. It's the seat of many of the sovereign wealth funds and many of the newer tech investors. It's also strong on aviation, for example, on defense, obviously oil and gas. Education is coming up as a key theme. More and more sectors find Abu Dhabi a good environment. We have, as I mentioned, an international legal system, and that is another key factor is why companies really across sectors come here, because they, their stakeholders, their customers feel a little bit more confident dealing under a legal system they're familiar with. We're broad-based. We're by no means limited to financial services. I think our list has well over 800 different activities that can be done from here. We, by the merit of having a different legal system than onshore, make other tools available. And we'll come to that. So, for example, when you're setting up a startup and you want to have different share classes or convertible notes, there are a number of traditional measures that are a little bit trickier setting up under the local legal system versus doing it in a common law environment. We'll come back to others of those. And then I think also on the high level merits is that we provide a number of services to firms, helping them set up. More importantly, I think we're also home to a strong and growing ecosystem. We have today, 5.5 years after we launched, about 3,300 businesses in ADGM. Many of them are big international institutions, banks, asset management firms, venture capitalists, etc. Also, strong community of professional services, which is really valuable to a lot of our startups. We have big corporate players in here who also or should be on the startup horizon. Some of them do corporate venture capital, others are looking for technology and present good partnership opportunities. With that, if we can change slides again, I'll touch upon two angles to ADGM that can be relevant for those of you who are startup founders. The first is a quite simple one. Wherever you are, whatever you do, you can use, if we can have, yes, that slide please. You can access and benefit from ADGM's legal environment by setting up a holding entity in ADGM. And I believe for you founders, many of you who are in touch with lawyers or probably professional investors, they ask that you have a two-layered structure. You have your operational entity, and then you have a holding company on top of that. Holding company to be kept as clean as possible. That's where you have your ownership matter. So that's where you take in capital, for example. That's where you form the structure for the investment. Traditionally, many startups in the region have gone to overseas jurisdictions to set up holding companies. Now you can do that easily in ADGM. It's cheap. It's well under $2,000 US. With increasing economic substance criteria elsewhere in the world, it's often becoming difficult to have these passive entities, which is often is further away from where you actually are. So if you are local founders, if your investors are familiar with ADGM, then we can definitely recommend and help you create that clean dual structure. The merit of doing that many times is that the investors, both your current and your next ones, they know what they're looking for. They want a clean investable structure. They want to be able to follow your cap tables. They want to be able to track how the company has grown. And you can easier do that if you keep a clean holding level company on top.
Martin, do you mind?
Sorry,
I was going to jump in at this point because we're always asked this question, so it might be helpful to answer it now. With the ADGM SPV, so this structure is exactly what, for example, we as lawyers do advise on all the time. So just if we look at the ADGM SPV, there are two types. There's the SPV itself, and then there's the SPV acting as a holding. So, and there are two sets of fees for those. There's the SPV, I think, which is, as you said, just shy of about $2,000, and then there's the holding, which is a little more. So can you just specifically tell us the differences in fees for those two? And also in this case, the ADGM SPV, is that the holding structure, not the SPV?
I'm sorry, what I assume you refer to here, Suraya, is if you have a more active holding entity on top.
Sorry, yes, the active holding rather than the passive holding. That was the question.
Okay, yes, so what I've addressed so far is a passive. It's just a corporate box. It doesn't employ people, it doesn't have an office. Its job is to hold assets. For this discussion, we're talking about a startup, but it could be an aircraft, it could be an art collection, it could be operational business, it could be real estate. If you more want to do an operational holding company, so you put an office in place, you have people there, you can say if you have a portfolio of companies, then we're talking a different price category around 10,000 US. It's as if it's a full-blown operational business.
Perfect. So the SPV is just shy of $2,000, the passive, sorry,
exactly.
SPV, and the active then is the $10,000, because we're always asked that question. So I hope that clarifies it now for people as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, and unless you have quite sophisticated business, there's really no need for having an active holding company. Put your efforts into your operational company, I would say, and then just make sure that you meet investor requirements by having a passive entity on top.
Exactly. Perfect.
But it's a good question, Suraya. We noticed when we launched that since we didn't really have anything cheaper than 10,000 for operational companies, ADGM was not an ideal environment for startups. Exactly. But if you can add the next slide, please.
That was exactly why I asked that question.
Yes.
A lot of people think of AGM and say, but it's just too expensive, so we don't want to go there. And then we have to explain, well, actually, there's quite a better alternative, and it's cheaper and cost effective and serves the purpose as well with the passive.
Indeed. So we noticed that a lot of startups liked ADGM to put their SPVs holding companies in. A lot of investors from seed all the way to IPO stage also like ADGM. We have specific regulatory regimes for them. We do quite active market engagement and outreach to attract and engage and stimulate more financial activities. But the problem was that ADGM was initially too expensive for startups. That said, though, it is a really important theme all across Abu Dhabi. We launched 2 years ago a specific startup license. It has 2 stages. It gives you full operational license. You can employ people, you can issue visas, you can do everything a full ADGM company can, but costs are very much discounted. The smallest one for pure startups, it's $700. We then have an emergent state for companies that are over 10 employees for $4,000. This is applicable to any tech-focused young business. And we obviously help them also with office space in WeWork and access to the broader ecosystem. And just a few words to round up on that ecosystem, because ADGM is much, much more than the companies in here. We work very closely with a number of accelerators, with a number of the government-funded support programs here in Abu Dhabi, under the Ramadan 21 umbrella that was also launched here 2 years ago, where government of Abu Dhabi is putting significant resources into a couple of direct tech pillars, but also on the overall, improving the overall business climate here. So together with some key organizations like Abu Dhabi Investment Office, Mubadala and their Tech Hub 71, with Plug and Play, for example, the international accelerator and early stage investor, with Department of Health, with MAN. We have a range of sector-specific accelerators in ADGM: health tech, aerospace defense, consumer tech. There are a couple of deep tech initiatives. We are sector agnostic. We are a legal jurisdiction, an environment for tech startups. We have a strong ecosystem of advisors, and through all these partnerships, a lot of good content for tech entrepreneurs in various fields. I'll leave it at that, Suraya, and happy to answer questions as we round up everyone's part.
Perfect. So I can see that a few questions have come in. I believe you've answered them already, but what we'll do is hear from the next speakers anyway and come back to those. Because one of them was, for example, the costs associated to the two options, the passive SPV and the holding. We've answered that. And there's a few about where they can set up. So let's hear from Sharjah Park next. Mr. Shefiu. Is Mr. Shefiu on? I think he may have dropped off.
Nope, still here.
I can't see. You're still there? Oh, there you are. Sorry, can't see you because you're not speaking. Okay, no worries. Perfect. So, Mr. Shefiu, there's a few questions that have come in as well about Sharjah free zone. In contrast to Abu Dhabi. So let's hear from you about Sharjah Research, Technology and Innovation Park and what you offer to startups and how you develop the ecosystem to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Perfect.
Space, sorry.
Thanks very much for having me, Suraya, and it's a pleasure to be here alongside Martin, Paul, Kimberly, and Nat as well. We'll try to be as quick as possible just to allow for some time for my other panelists. The Sharjah Research and Technology Innovation Park happens to be the youngest of the group here, so we can say we're more or less the new kid on the block. We came into existence from a Mary decree by His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi in 2016, but we've more or less been operating in stealth mode up until 2018 when we started onboarding our first entities. So we are a subsidiary of the American University of Sharjah, and the whole ambit behind developing the park is to focus on deep tech and to really drive forward in terms of the innovations, whether it's startups, SMEs, or really the conglomerates. So we have 6 focus areas that we predominantly targeted towards. If we could swap to the next slide. As you can see on your screen here, we are more or less deep tech focused. So we cover areas of mobility, digitization, including healthcare technologies and so on, renewable energies, environmental technologies, including circular economy, water tech, and production design and architecture. So you can see that we're more hands-on, on-the-ground innovation and technology park. And so we are quite a bit more niche if you were to compare ourselves to ADGM, which is a bit more sector agnostic, so to speak. Obviously, we follow a sort of a triple helix approach with how we operate. And what this means is that we work very closely with, being a government entity ourselves, we work very closely with both the local level government and the federal level governments. Being an offshoot of the American University of Sharjah, we have several examples of commercialization of IP coming from the academic sector. And we are more or less kind of an independent authority as well, and we have several partners from the private sector. So all these different elements actually come together to develop a holistic, I would say, ecosystem, for the lack of a better word, to really drive innovation as we move forward. I would say an example of this sort of approach, there are several, but for lack of time, we could talk about one of our startups that happens to be in the field of artificial intelligence that actually set up with us sometime towards the end of 2019. We identified specifically their key areas of strength, initially introduced them to 15 Sharjah government entities locally. We've conducted a AI readiness model with these government entities, and now we've implemented the second stage of actually identifying which segments, which of these Sharjah government entities we can actually go a step further, develop data maturity models, and actually help them in developing data-oriented artificial intelligence supported decision making. So this is sort of how we operate with the entities that set up with us. To give a slightly bigger overview of the park itself, to switch to the next slide. As I mentioned, we are one of the newer kids on the block, so we officially started operating in 2018. 2019 is when we really kicked things into gear. At present, we have over 100 entities that are established with us, most of whom have actually been coming across to us over the last 18 to 24 months. Quite proud to say that we already have 6 deep tech anchor projects already implemented within the park over the last 12 to 18 months. This includes fields of photovoltaics, agri-tech projects, 3D construction. Actually developed a 3D constructed villa within the park. We have one of the largest additive manufacturing hubs within the region. We started off with a small AR/VR experiential center, and within the next 3 months, we will be expanding that into 150 square meter experiential center that will be established in the ground floor of the park as well. And last but definitely not least, one of our partners, Skyway, actually is in the process of implementing one of the largest regional transportation hubs. So we actually have a 3-kilometer stretch of different types of logistics and people movement basically established to do a test run. We did a very small scale test run towards the end of 2019, which was inaugurated by His Highness, just 500 meters just for moving people of up to 8 at a go. But we're more excited of the second and third phase that should complete by, I would say, September of this year, moving people between 20 to 25 in single pods, and actually for the logistics segment as well. So we are in discussions with connecting 2 different parts of Sharjah. Hopefully that will be a game changer for the logistics segment. We spoke about the Additive Manufacturing Hub. So we, in conjunction with several of our partners, GE, Mensa, Siemens, and so on, we actually have one of the largest open innovation labs for rapid prototyping. I guess we come second only to Turkey in the Middle East. So 3 floors of different types of equipment, ranging from printing of metals, plastics, polymers, CNC machines for wood, metals, electronics, textiles. So we're actually we have completed the first phase, and the second phase should be concluded, I believe, before Q2 of this year. And we will be offering these equipment to young and early stage entrepreneurs to prototype their equipment. And we are talking about something that costs you as cheap as a gym membership, between 500 to 600 dirhams a month, and access to different senior executives who will be able to assist you with this equipment. Last but not least, obviously we have launched the Sharjah Angel Investor Network in December last year, and thankfully we've had Suraya on this as well to support us with this initiative. It was something that has been on our CEO's mind for quite some time now, when we sort of initially launched it to understand the appetite of Sharjah and the Northern Emirates when it comes to startups, especially deep tech startups, which is not really a buzzword, but really moving towards that direction. We are sort of moving away from e-commerce and your regular super apps, so to speak, so it's good to see. And the Sharjah Angel Investor Network is mainly to draw attention towards these types of startups, providing them access to investors, mentorships, investment opportunities, and really developing the innovation ecosystem. So we did an initial sort of soft launch in December with just about 20 investors, introduced mainly the startups within the park, about 10 of them. And, we were mildly surprised to see that, with just a soft launch, we had 2 investments take place in the first initiative itself. So watch this space for a lot of other initiatives that we should be pulling off in the next couple of months with some of the other startups as well. I'll probably wrap up here. There's a lot to talk about, but I would have to give some time to my colleagues, but happy to take some questions about the park and anything more towards deep tech and the 6 segments that we cover.
Thanks very much, Shefiu. While you're on that, so as you've just mentioned, you're very interested in deep tech. That's focus, and you made a point about you're moving more away from like the basic e-commerce licensing. So we've got a question from one of the panelists that come through, and he's asking if he wanted to form a company and his activities are website design and development, mobile app, digital marketing, etc. Would he then, or could he approach Sharjah Park and set up there, or would you is that a type of license that you could still give to potential entrepreneurs and startups who are wanting to set up licenses in those activities, or are you moving away from that?
I mean, we do not say no, but of course we go through sort of a screening process with all the entities that set up with us. So we do have one, if memory serves me right, we do have one entity that is into website development, but implementing certain elements of artificial intelligence into what they develop. So while we are a free zone, I would have to highlight that we were quite focused on the segments that we cater to. And in one of the slides, you would have noticed that we're one of the targets assigned to us by His Highness and the Board of Trustees is to expand the number of entities within the park to approximately 250 by Q1 in 2022. And one of the reasoning behind this is because we actually do a bit of filtering and there is a selection process before the entities do set up with us. And the primary reason for this is we operate more or less like a startup ourselves. And we actually do a lot of soft landing support and individual support to the entities, whether they're a startup, whether they're an SME, or even one of the larger entities, in terms of identifying the solutions that they have, connect them with local or regional projects. And we know for a fact that we cannot do this for a large number of entities. So I would say, send in a request to our website. Go through the filtration process. It does go through a final review through our Board of Trustees before the permission to apply for the license is granted. But you never know. We've had 1 or 2 cases where they do seem basic in nature. But once we've received their I would say project plan and what their intentions are, then we've been able to onboard them into the park. So I wouldn't say no just yet. I mean, to answer in a nutshell, but I would love to know more before I give a specific answer to that.
Perfect, excellent. I think we've got a very clear idea about the agenda of the park, though, and its focus. So thanks very much for that. What I might do is now let's hear from Dubai Startup Hub, Kimberly James. Natalie. Sorry, I can see Kimberly on the screen, so I've said Kimberly. Natalia Shefiu. Natalia, can you tell us a little bit about Dubai Startup Hub as being one of the arms of Dubai Chamber and very focused on empowering entrepreneurs? Love to hear from you about what the Dubai Startup is doing, anything that it's done, any, I guess, success stories that you can share with us to empower the startups and entrepreneurs who are in the audience today.
Marvelous. Thank you very much, Suraya, and it's absolute pleasure to be in the company of such experts. And I think our job is getting increasingly harder in terms of keeping up with everything what's happening and things that are available to support startups. And we could see how all the diverse emirates and cities are coming up with the new initiatives and new conducive regimes to support entrepreneurship. When we speak about Dubai Chamber, which I represent, Dubai Chamber is a government organization. We are roughly 55 years old, 56, and we have been in the business of protecting, supporting, and advocating for the private sector of Dubai. Our focus toward entrepreneurship and specifically technology-enabled entrepreneurship came in the spotlight roughly 5 years ago, 2016, and this is where the department has been shaped and formed, and this is where we brought the initiative called Dubai Startup Hub to the market. Very much the objective of Dubai Startup Hub, it does echoes the grand mission of Dubai Chamber. But again, we cater our services, our programs towards technology-enabled companies. So we launched 5 years ago. By now, we have served more than 7,000 entrepreneurs and founders who have gone through our programs, who have successfully graduated from our programs. What we do provide? We provide clarity, direction, and we create business opportunities. I'm probably the only person on this panel legally unqualified to speak about business license and corporate setup or some office rates available across the UAE. I could speak more about the business opportunities when it comes of how you potentially could leverage Dubai and the UAE as your test bed for innovative technology, and how you could use this use case in Dubai to expand your business across MENA region and globally. Because if you think about, let's step back, and there is, philosophically speaking, there is this growing body of evidence that the future of the business is with city-state, with a city environment. And it's once you have your concept proven and you found your market fit in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, as the big cities, it's much more easier to scale this business to Beijing, to Sao Paulo, to New York, rather than a startup from New York scaling in the Midwest America. So in this respect, when we think about Dubai, we're talking about the cultural diversity, the growing youth, young market with where you could test those technologies, those products that will make your business sustainable if you nail it here. At the same time, again, as I mentioned, we have served more than 7,000 entrepreneurs. Today, our database of startups in Dubai Startup Hub with Dubai Chamber is roughly 10,000. And we could speak about not sad numbers, but it's the reality we have to deal with. It's by year 4, 40% of the startups will be gone. Right, 40%. The 40% of those will be gone because of the lack of the market fit. There is simply the solution is there, but there is no problem for that solution. And so this is when it comes to the agile portfolio of the programs and services that Dubai Chamber through Dubai Startup Hub is designing for entrepreneurs and startups, is about creating the platforms, creating opportunities for the startups to check this market fit, to alterate your business proposition that you could actually see, okay, my solution is great for Dubai, great for UAE. I make the conscious choice. I'm relocating myself, my family, my developers to Dubai, for instance, if we speak about the overseas based startups. So that's why I mentioned agile. Our portfolio of the programs, it varies from year to year. Year 2020, we could speak about, aside from the year of COVID, we can speak about it was the year of fintech, education tech, health tech companies. And I think this is what Martin and Shefiu also kind of pointed, that there is a growing number of that companies entering Dubai, and also local entrepreneurs are pivoting toward those sectors, and surely the e-commerce. So if we summarize what we've seen in 2020, it was the year of B2B startups. They were the most resilient, they pivoted their businesses, and one of the secret of success, if we call it success, like the survival was already success last year for many companies. They started looking at the overseas markets, and the solid base that these companies could have in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, it provides this foundation. Because I could speak only of Dubai Chamber of Commerce, this is what we provide, but this similar mechanism and more support and infrastructure is available across the whole country. And again, probably for many people on this call, just like for anybody who will speak, it comes to a great surprise that Dubai Chamber of Commerce, we are quite unusual Chamber of Commerce. We have our our legal presence in 11 different cities across the world. We have our legal representatives sitting from Beijing to Panama to Brazil, and all their mission and job there is to provide the hand-holding and ensure that Dubai, UAE businesses have the support in the local, in those local market attractive, be it sourcing the materials, diversifying your manufacturing base, or entering the market. Because what we've seen, and again, a few successful stories from our side, in 2020, despite the pandemic, despite the pressures, we've seen our health tech startups actually expanded to Africa with our support from Ethiopian office. They expanded to Rwanda. Mobility startup expanded to CIS countries, entering from Azerbaijan. So there is a lot of opportunities. And again, in the times like this, 2020 showed, right? You have to be agile when it comes to your market, to your value proposition, and also to the leadership team that you have with you. Because again, Suraya, you have your co-founders, right? You understand how in the times like yesterday, and probably even today, it's about the person who would be with you, who will put their all best effort, intention, and the last drop of blood to ensure that the business survives and the business grows. Absolutely. And that's why, not surprisingly, in 2021, we are very proudly bringing the Co-Founder Dubai program, which is very unusual for our business, because we are, again, as I pointed, we are in this B2B opportunities business. This is what we provide. We don't take equity, we don't give license, we don't give office space, but we will always share where to go and what to find. And that's why we last year only, we together with Virtuzone, with Paul, we launched 8 dedicated industry guides to expedite this process. But we launched Co-Founder Dubai, helping amazing startup companies who are at this pivoting point. If they bring the right leadership skill set right now, they would be on this exponential curve to expand. And on another hand, what we've seen in 2020, and that's a reality, a lot of people lost their jobs, and these fantastic talent who are already based in the UAE. And some of these layoffs were happening across the corporate sector. Again, people with lots of expertise, with the knowledge, with some financial assets that they could successfully deploy in building new companies, innovative companies across the sectors that we have been just talking about, deep tech, fintech, health tech. And that's why we are concurrently running this program where we help top promising technology companies on identifying and bringing their co-founders, and see how we can provide them with HR, with legal support to ensure that those partnerships are solid. They are foundation for the future success of these companies. So I think the last but not least, I would like to highlight that going back to the international expansion of the startups and entrepreneurs, we have several dedicated programs for that. To check your market fit in Dubai, we have a program called Market Access, where we open procurement opportunities for technology companies with locally based corporate and government entities. With that, we see how increasingly, and this is a positive sign of Dubai and the UAE corporate sector, historically we've been seeing this growing public-private partnerships. And this is what Sharjah Park is testimony of, that there are so many programs happening under the umbrella of public-private partnerships. That for the corporates, it's increasingly become very normal to work with the startups. But at the same time, the legalities of structuring those contracts. Many corporates, it's not only on the startup side, many corporates are still not aware of how you could draft and what you could expect from startup company when you want to bring that company into your procurement process. And probably, Suraya, you also face the situation when your client, a startup company, is asked by the corporate partner, corporate client, to provide the evidence of existence for the past 5 years, while by default a startup company is 3 years old.
Yes, exactly.
So, and how you go about it from the legally, mutually acceptable manner. So I think this is the question to yourself and to your peers in the market. And then we have also Scale Up Dubai program, where we further support with the business development for the scale-up companies who are who already have in their behind their backs a number of proof of concept projects and corporate clients, and then they're also ready to leverage Dubai, the UAE, and expand to overseas market. So That's what on our agenda this year, right? And last but not least, I would like to highlight, I mentioned that in the mission of Dubai Chamber, according to our charter, we have the big focus on advocacy. And we as Dubai Startup Hub, as I would not say a little brother, but the arm for entrepreneurs of Dubai Chamber, we are taking this part of the mission very seriously. And over the past 4 years, we have been constantly in touch, keeping the hand on the pulse of the ecosystem, seeking the feedback from the entrepreneurs to understand the biggest burning challenges in the local market. Because albeit Dubai, UAE is the gateway for the region, is one of the top destinations when it comes to business openness, ease of doing business, transparency, and so on and so forth. At the same time, good is not enough. It's not good enough for the leadership of the country. It's not good enough for Dubai Chamber. It's not good enough for Dubai Startup Hub. We're pushing forward to see where we could improve situation. And in the past several years, we have been working around the subject of challenges of opening bank account and how the banking sector had to go that digital transformation to ensure that the cost of serving the startups and entrepreneurs is effective and sensible for the banks, because before, historically, they looked at this segment as a cost center rather than revenue center if you can't give them the loan facility and so on and so forth. So no, they are the backbone. Startups and entrepreneurs are backbone of this country, and we need to make sure that the rest of the ecosystem, including the banking, is supportive, but it also makes profitable and sensible from the commercial perspective to the banks to serve the sector. And then market fit validation. And this year we're very proudly bringing a brand new program to help startups and entrepreneurs to validate business ideas in the local market, specifically focusing, surprisingly, on the B2C segment. I'm not going to break the news because the press release is not here, is not there yet. And although it's a fantastic platform, but I really would love everybody on this call, first of all, to follow Dubai Startup Hub and Dubai Chamber, and to see again, not just like for that announcement and release, but also actively engage in our programs, because in the end, we are here to serve you. And as we like to say, it sounds cliche for some, but we take it very close to heart. Your success is our success, because without you, there is no need for us to be here to ensure that we have this conducive environment and ecosystem to support the private sector of Dubai.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Natalia. You can see I didn't jump in there to ask you any questions whatsoever, because everything you said was so valuable, I think, to all the startups and entrepreneurs that are in this audience. And, you know, I can see through the chats that a lot of people have said this is such great initiatives, you know, well done. It's good to see. They're highly commended. So, you know, it's very impressive what Dubai Startup Chambers is doing. And as you said, you know, it might sound cliche, but it's not that. You are putting the effort in, the energy in, and that's definitely showing. And it's very exciting to see the new initiatives that will be coming out from the Dubai Startup Chamber and the Startup Hub particularly. So thank you so much for giving us so much insight into what, you know, the active work and that you've been doing over the last years and will be doing. So what I might do now is, because I'm conscious of time, so I won't ask the questions just yet to the audience. Let's hear from Paul Bryson from Virtuzone, and then I'll ask some of the questions and throw in some additional ones that we get asked regularly from startups. But Paul, you're from Virtuzone. So Virtuzone is a company that sets up companies and supports entrepreneurs to make the decision about where to set up. So from your perspective, you've had the benefit of hearing from the other speakers now. You've heard, you know, from Martin, who represents Abu Dhabi and the ADGM particularly, Shefiu from Sharjah, Natalia from Dubai, working very closely in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We'd love to hear from you about your view for, you know, from Virtuzone's perspective, and what can you tell our startups and entrepreneurs who are eager to do business and scale up in the UAE?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having us on, Suraya. It's always great to work with you guys and to be associated. I'll give you a little bit of background. I won't keep it too long, because I know that we have run over a little bit, so that we really want to have the interactive side rather than me talking about myself or Virtuzone side.
Sure, but we've got an attentive audience, so go on.
So I'm Paul Bryson. I'm Group Commercial Director at Virtuzone. I've personally been structuring and restructuring companies inside the UAE for the last 10 years. So I've been around the market quite a bit. I've been with Virtuzone for the last 3.5 years. Prior to that, was MD of Corporate Services for a law firm here based in Dubai. But Virtuzone are now the largest corporate service provider inside the UAE, okay? Both in terms of staff numbers, client numbers, and turnover. And that's probably quite surprising to loads of other corporate service providers in the region and to some of the law firms that we work for, because we have this reputation that Virtuzone are help people start up in the Northern Emirates just in free zones, help small, cheap and cheerful vehicles be established, which is absolutely not the case. At the moment, we're probably establishing on average around 300 brand new companies inside the Emirates each and every month, which is a staggering number. It wasn't as big as that a couple of years ago, and we've really seen things grow, particularly over the last year. When COVID hit, we've seen our market share really grow because we found that other CSPs perhaps were not spending as much in advertising, or not aggressively targeting clients and startups and entrepreneurs here, and we found that we had probably one of the best years that we've ever had in terms of acquisition, perhaps not in terms of margin or gross profit, but certainly in terms of acquisition. It was a fantastic year, and in November we established more new companies inside the UAE than Virtuzone ever have established in 11 years, which I thought was a fantastic achievement.
Impressive, yeah, considering the times we're in.
And Natalia knows that because we work closely with Dubai Startup Hub. We've discussed that with some of their members recently. So we definitely see the market is booming. And typically what would happen is a client would come to Virtuzone knowing that they have a business idea, knowing that they have a product or service, but not necessarily knowing how to develop a corporate structure or implement a corporate structure here on the ground. And that's where we would really look at that. We've got a team of 120 staff in-house here downtown, and we would look at that and find and help them with the best route to market. And we know Martin's guys very well at ADGM also. We are massive. Personally, I'm a massive advocate of ADGM. There was very much a requirement for a rival to DIFC. And as a stock, even for us as a stock pitch, if you like, we tend to throw ADGM SPVs on top of any operational vehicle that we recommend to be established, and we see massive benefits for that, for such little investment, right? Getting that UK common law framework in there, particularly with your shareholders agreements as well. The fact that it can't be challenged in the Sharia courts, we find it phenomenal. It's great for investors coming from abroad, just to give them that little bit of extra confidence that we can circumvent Sharia law here, because Sharia law is great for family law, but perhaps not ideal for commerce and business. So we find ADGM fantastic for that as well. Currently, we work with pretty much every emirate and every free zone. It's a bit of a maze when an investor comes in and just knows that they want to set up, and sometimes they'll come to you with an obscure product, and they'll have an obscure notion of how they want to develop and sell the product on the ground, and you have to just kind of keep them grounded there and develop just a real nice tight legal structure on how they can operate, how they can get out there in 5 years, just what's the plan down the line, are they going to raise funds and capital, because typically they will come to you with the idea, very excited about selling the product or service and making some money without actually thinking about the legal aspects, and that's typically where we come in. But we tend to find ourselves quite a good aggregate provider of business to free zones as well, and due to that we find that we have great relationships with free zones. We can make recommendations with them for new products. We've worked very well with some of the free zones in the Northern Emirates who are looking to keep that value proposition that they put in place, because they have to have a USP. Otherwise, everyone would set up in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. So we've worked very close with them in the last year, developing some products for people who perhaps in Dubai have lost their job and they want to stay here with family, and putting that all-inclusive package in place where you can set up your consultancy or trading business. You can have visas for yourself, your kids, your wife, for all in, you know, kind of 25,000-30,000 dirham fee each year, keeps it completely manageable, and just goes against the kind of status quo, the cost of structuring and setting up businesses. So we work closely with government entities in that regard. And in Dubai, as I mentioned, we are an official partner of Dubai Startup Hub, so we've worked closely with the Chamber on a few initiatives there. We're an official partner of Dubai FDI and Dubai DED, so we do quite a bit of annual travel in normal times with them, where we'll visit countries throughout Europe and North Africa and look at how do we help these people who are interested in coming here find their feet. How do we develop a plan to get them in to Dubai, how to develop a market entry strategy. So we work closely with the government in that regard. I think that's really all you need to know about us as a CSP. I would much rather just take questions from the floor than talk about what we do.
Perfect, but thank you so much. I think you've given us a clear idea about what your service offerings are and who your partners are, and really that connection that you have. You know, not just with one free zone, as you said, it's really holistic. So you cover the entire UAE and really have that relationship. So, you know, anybody who's got any questions can come to you as a point of communication and say, okay, well, I've got this in mind that I want to start up. Where is best to go? So we do have a few questions that will come in, and I know that we're short of time, but if you can continue with us, that would be amazing. So let's get through some of these questions now. Let me start with you, Paul, because one of the questions we have is from Kunal Narwani, who says that he finds that most licensing regimes keep licensing costs more or less competitive. His question relates to the visa costs and what causes the escalation of visa costs for entrepreneurs and staff. So he'd like to have some light thrown around that. He wants each panelist to throw some light. What we might do is get Virtuzone, Paul, to answer this question, because I think you'll probably have a more diverse view of it, and then come back if it doesn't feel like we've satisfied that question for him.
So thanks very much. Thanks for the question. We process loads of visas. I couldn't even pick off the top of my head a number as to how many we process monthly, but it's in the hundreds, right? Not in the thousands, but it's definitely in a few hundred each month we're processing new visas. And the costs do very much differentiate between free zone to free zone, emirate to emirate as well. And there's a few factors to that. Your standard federal government costs, they do not change. Some free zones might require, they follow the rules and protocols set out by Abu Dhabi's immigration. Dubai tends to work on its own as a standalone emirate relating to immigration. If you kind of follow the Abu Dhabi rules, previously they've had some e-channel registrations and deposits in there. So the costs seem high. In actual fact, often they are deposits that will be returned. But I do understand that when you're starting up a business, you have to view that as a cost as opposed to an investment. You are often getting that money back. Typically, you find it doesn't change too much. You've got your costs that the free zone will buy the visa from immigration. They'll throw something on top there to make it up for themselves, you know, to make a better margin for themselves. And then if Virtuzone were processing the visa, we would charge a fee on top for us actually doing the visa process, for taking you for your medical, you know, VIP medical, taking you for your stamping, etc. But I think that visa costs are probably as low as they have been in the last kind of 4 or 5 years.
Excellent. So thanks very much. So I hope that answered the question for Kunal. Essentially, you know, as you said, you're getting it from immigration. That's a basic cost. And then there's just a few additional costs on top of that. But more or less, I think we've noticed as well that visa costs, if not only this year, but probably in the last few, have remained pretty stable. I haven't really seen them escalate so high. I mean, they're pretty much just been standard. So Kunal, if there's something else you want to ask, please leave your question in the chat box. But what I might do is come to the question that relates to Abu Dhabi. So Martin would be in the best position to answer this question. Martin, we have a few questions here actually that relate to Abu Dhabi. So first question is from Mohammed Shuaib, who has a free zone license in Sharjah and says, can I open an office in Abu Dhabi? And then again, if he has a license in Abu Dhabi free zone, can he have a license in Dubai? So let's just focus on the Abu Dhabi free zone. If he's got one in Sharjah, can he open up in Abu Dhabi if he wanted to? I have the answer to this, but I want you to answer.
I suspect there are a couple of angles to the question. There is, in principle, nothing that prohibits you, irrespective of where your parent entity is, to set up a subsidiary or a branch, for example, in Abu Dhabi or an ADGM. So high level, yes, that's fine. If the question is more, are there any limits to you doing business in Abu Dhabi from a Sharjah company? Again, I'd say in principle, no. There may be certain government entities who have in their procurement processes requirements. I'm not aware that there would be any issues with entities elsewhere in the UAE. We have something called dual license here in Abu Dhabi, a cooperation between, on the one hand, the free zones, so ADGM, Masdar, 2454, etc., and D&D, the local Department of Economic Development, where USA free zone business also can get a local license to avoid any issues if there are clients who, for some reason, say they only deal with free zone companies. But between Emirate and Emirate, no issue as far as we're concerned. That's as much as I can say on that. I can't really comment on any Sharjah or Dubai policies on this.
Excellent, no worries. Perfect, so thanks very much. I think that answered it sufficiently. I've got two more questions for you, and then I'll take a question, direct that to Natalia, and another one for Shefiu. So we've got an anonymous attendee who asked, what is the regulatory environment for SPACs, which I think are special purpose acquisition companies in the UAE? Can this be used as a medium for exit for UAE-based startups, like what is happening in the US? So I'm assuming this person's from the US, as is familiar with what's going on there, and has asked whether you can have a similar structure to that in the ADGM. So it's a special purpose acquisition company.
Yeah, and for those of you who are not familiar with this, this is a biggish trend in the US right now, where you create listed entities that when you list them, they don't really have any assets. They don't own companies. So what they do is they garner through an IPO a lot of cash, and then they find acquisition opportunities, buying startups, for example, young companies, and then hopefully generate a good return over time. I'm not aware that there are any on any of the various marketplaces here in the UAE. We as ADGM, we're not regulated. We don't have a stock exchange in ADGM, so we don't have a house view on this. I'm not sure that we have ever gotten the question from another exchange saying there is an entity in ADGM who wants to act as an SPAC. So I'm not aware of this happening here. If it were to happen, I'd welcome it personally. I think it's an interesting development if it can be done here. Hopefully adding to the potential range of owners and investors in startups. Likely though, they'll have to be relatively late stage startups. So if you're an early or mid position in your life cycle, there are probably other sources of capital you need to work harder. Thanks.
Sure. Perfect. Thanks very much. And one last one for you. So with the ADGM startup license, this person has asked whether you also need to have an expense of setting up a holding company. So again, I'll get you to answer this and I can add to it.
I think it'd be interesting to hear, for example, Paul's view on this. You don't need to do it. You set up your startup entity, that's where you drive your operations in. I think the holding level entity comes in when you have investors who ask that for you. If you're a self-funded entity, you don't plan to list or raise institutional money, then you probably might not need it for the time being, at least. But yeah, I'm not the legal advisor, so
yeah, exactly. I can add to that because obviously Legal Circle is purely legal advisory, and this is what we advise people on and startups most times. So a holding company is a good thing to have, but it's not necessary in the very early stages. And typically we advise to have those when there are multiple entities within the structure, that it would be fit really nicely to have a holding entity on top where you've got your founders and your investors who have invested in the multiple entities that you have below that. And then so essentially your structure would be holding, and below that you would have a number of different licenses and entities as part of the same businesses below that. But is it the first thing that you have to have as a startup? No, not necessarily. But it would be good to run your structure and your corporate structure by a legal advisor and Virtuzone. I mean, Paul was also saying he advises on that as well. To run it by a legal advisor or equivalent to Paul at Virtuzone, and say, okay, this is how we're planning to grow, or this is the number of entities we currently have in our structure. How do we best restructure it so that it's nice and clean and it's very transparent, so that when we are going through different fundraising rounds, or if you're planning to exit or list for IPO, that your structure supports that activity. So Yeah, in a nutshell, no, it's not the first thing you have to have. But at some point down the line, if you do scale up and you are building momentum and traction, generally you would put a holding into your structure. So we can answer more on that anyway offline if anybody's got any questions. So thanks very much for that, Martin. What I'll do now, we've got a few more questions. So I'm going to quickly ask those, and then if we don't have any more come through, we can provide our details, of course, to the audience, and they can ask us questions. We can come back, offline and answer those for them. So I've got one here from Salman Khan, and it says, we have a mobile app for IT. The product is ready, but we are looking for some investors to do marketing and start operations. Is there any way this session will help to achieve this? Okay, so Natalia, what can you provide or add some insight into this question to support?
Thank you, Suraya. So, well, Salman, first of all, you're halfway there. It's incredible that the fact that you actually got the product, you have minimum viable product that's ready to be deployed in the environment. We are not sure from this question whether you are operating in the B2C or B2B segment. But when we speak about investment, there is a few tips of advice I can share. Again, this is something based on our experience of working with the startups and entrepreneurs in Dubai. First, I would actually refer you to the latest version of the startup panorama report produced by Dubai Chamber, where we map the whole investor ecosystem in Dubai, and we map it from the early stage, from idea stage, angel investment clubs that's available in Dubai, to the early stage. This is where you probably will find yourself. This is first thing, right? So you could actually see who in this specific emirate is looking after early stage investors, because a lot of entrepreneurs, what we've seen, especially those from overseas, they come here with the early stage product and they start chasing in big institutional investors who cannot be bothered of even responding to your message via LinkedIn or via whatever mean of communication you will choose. So look into those who are actually active in early stage and for who you will be of interest. It's the first thing. Second of all, I picked from your question that you are looking for the investor to support your marketing activities. And this is an interesting thing. Could we think together creatively about how you can market your product and get a little bit more customer validation without the investor? And again, based on the experience of our entrepreneurs and startups, first of all, Dubai and UAE in general is abundant when it comes to startup competitions. And this is what one of our successful stories, they are actually in the construction tech, they're in hardware devices. They built their solution and they pitched in our Smartpreneur competition. And at that competition, they met the investor. Okay, we don't run right now the physical competition, the physical events as of now, but there is still, from our experience, neither Dubai, no UAE, no Sharjah haven't stopped the startup focused competitions. What the relevant competition for your business gives to you, it gives you the access to the pool of mentors, industry experts, and some of them happen to be often actually angel investors. Second of all, it gives you the credibility because again, the pool of the judges, and if you're lucky enough and you get the first spotlight, you get PR exposure, you get the affiliation. For instance, if it's this competition is run in affiliation with a government entity, you get this validation and the badge of credit in the local market that will further draw more sophisticated investors, hopefully, to your business. And then last but not least, incubators, because if you're at minimum viable product stage, again, being part of the incubator will open the door to the pool of qualified investors. Because what you definitely don't, you can get the money, you can find the money, but what kind of money beyond, what kind of value you could extract from just the investor? If let's say this happened to be that some wealthy individuals is part of this group on this call, right? In the end, you want this backup of the values this investor provides you with. It's access to market, it's credibility to the market, and so on and so forth. And that's why I would look at early stage investors who are in the Panorama report, then think about the relevant competition and relevant incubator, either industry agnostic or specific for your sector, and this will give you a much more solid foundation when it comes to funding this very important stage of your company.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Natalia. And I believe you've definitely answered that question. But again, if there's any more information that you require on that question, Salman, you can definitely reach out to us and we're happy to answer that offline. So I can see that we're already, my time shows that it's 20 to 2. So I know we've gone a little bit over and I've taken already so much of the speaker's time. So thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining. I can see that our audience was quite engaged. They're still on. If you do have any questions, as I've said to the audience, please do ask. We've got email. Maybe Salma can show our email and our details on the page. So you can email us, you can follow us on Instagram, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're happy to as well, if any of the speakers are happy for us to give their details so that the audience can connect direct. We're more than happy to do that. Of course, as at Legal Circle, we're legal service providers. So for us, we work with all of the different speakers today to set up either the right structure within their free zones or to work with corporate service providers for any of the ancillary services that they can provide. And of course, the advocates of any program that's in the UAE that supports entrepreneurs to develop themselves and to really have a head start in the UAE. So once again, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to all the speakers. And this is the 3rd webinar in our series, but we do have 2 further and upcoming webinars. So please reach out to us, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, and you can see all about the upcoming webinars. And again, if you've got any questions, we're more than happy to answer those for you. Without further ado, I think we have to come to a close. And see you all the next time. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Thanks very much for having us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.